In this video, we're talking about one of my favorite elements.
Fire.
As an avid outdoorsman, I think it's imperative to be prepared for emergency situations. And fire is one of those things that you absolutely need to have in case of an emergency. My fire kit is not the subject of this video. I started filming this video a couple of years ago, and my intent for it was primarily to discuss fire starters. Over the last couple of years, I've learned some things about ignition sources that I think are relevant to discuss here. I still want the video to primarily be about fire starters, but really it's probably going to end up being kind of 50-50 between ignition sources and fire starters. Recently, my wife has taken an interest in learning how to operate some of her own recreational vehicles, and instead of just being a perpetual passenger. And so I have made her a fire kit as well, and it was putting this fire kit together that kind of reminded me about this video and motivated me to get back to it. I'm approaching this from the perspective that you find yourself in a scenario where you are off-roading. Doesn't matter if it's dirt bike, snowmobile, four-wheel drive, just you're off pavement and you find yourself broken down or stuck, and someone who may be able to help you might come along in 5 minutes, they might come along in a couple of days. And you need to give yourself some time until that happens or until you can get out. I think one of the most important things you could do in that scenario is at least have the capability of starting a fire. And for this case, I'm going to consider it kind of an emergency fire. That doesn't mean that it might save your life, although it certainly could, but it will certainly make the scenario and the situation much more comfortable and tolerable. So what are the benefits of being able to start a fire in this situation? Number one, fire is a huge boost to your morale. There's just lots of things about it that psychologically make you feel like you're going to be okay. And that is very important in this type of scenario. Number two, a fire can ward off predators and bugs, again making your stay both psychologically and physically more comfortable. Number three, it can provide heat. That may not always be necessary, but it could be the thing that might save your life depending on the circumstances. And with that heat, you have the capability of perhaps cooking some food if you are prepared or able to harvest something. And probably more importantly, it can help keep you hydrated. In winter, it can provide you the opportunity to melt some snow and be able to stay hydrated. In other conditions, if there's water around, you can purify it to prevent getting sick and also, again, stay hydrated. And lastly, in this scenario, there's a good chance that someone might come looking for you, and fire can help identify your location. With both the smell, sight of smoke, or if it's later at night, the sight of the fire can help bring people to your aid. So we are not going to discuss in this video things like rubbing two sticks together or making a bow and drill and using char cloth and those kind of things. I'm focused on stuff that is more on the ready to go, but is also reliable, that you can have confidence in if your hands are cold and you're losing dexterity, or materials around you are maybe not the driest at a particular moment, that it can be enough to get a fire going. These are materials that once you harvest your fuel, you can have a fire going within a couple of minutes without having to really think about it too much, and that's the intent of this video. So what do we need for a fire? We need 3 important things. We need an ignition source, we need a fire starter. Sometimes those 2 things can overlap, and an ignition source can be all you need to start a fire, but I'm not going to take that for granted, so I'm considering those 2 things individually. And finally, I've already mentioned you need fuel, something to keep the fire burning. So let's talk about ignition sources. Because our recreational adventures can take us into a variety of different landscapes and territories, and at different times of year and different weather conditions, fire kits, I think, are important to have redundancies. This is an area where I have multiple options. And the reason I think ignition sources and fire starters need to be discussed together is because they kind of pair together. Certain ones work with each other and other pairings don't really work at all. So I've got stuff in my fire kit that can get me through pretty much anything I encounter here in the Northwest. So let's open my kit and see what I've got. These are my fire kits. This one is my main kit with my camping stuff, pretty much everything for camping, and this is the one that I carry on my day adventures. They pretty much have the same stuff in them. So let's go over this one, which is slightly more complete. I will do my best to keep my movements to a minimum to avoid distracting shadows, but there will be some of that. It's just what I have to work with. So here's my fire kit. When you think of an ignition source, your mind probably goes to 2 things: matches and lighters. And I certainly have those in my kit. Now, I don't really carry in my kit regular kitchen matches, as they are called. They're just not terribly reliable. I do have these matches. These are kind of your all-weather camping matches, so to speak. This is a little bit of fire starter that came with them. These work pretty well. They've got a nice long element on them that's going to burn once this starts. This will burn in pretty much any conditions. Wind, wet, you can light this, put it in the water, pull it back out, and as long as it hasn't burned down to the wood, it will fire back up and reignite. It's kind of like a sparkler. And these work. The problem with these is they don't have a real long life, but this is a good place to start. I would recommend, if you have these, not to keep them in like the regular box that they come in. Get some sort of container like this that has a strikeable paper on it to light them, and carry them that way, because boxes can get wet, disintegrate, and the biggest issue is the paper where you light them. If that gets wet, it's not going to work very well. This one, I mean, it's still exposed to the elements. It could get wet, but because it's got a good backer on it, it could still work for you. That said, I would consider this kind of my worst case scenario, last thing that I'm going to go to. What I like better is this. This is they call this like a strike match. Now this is a higher end one. Basic ones can run like 50 cents to $1. I believe I paid around $10 for a couple of these. That's each. They come with different heads. That's totally up to your liking. But what I like about these, you fill the reservoir up with just good old lighter fluid. You and then you can see It's got basically like a wick and a starter in here, and you strike it down the side. It makes a bigger flame than your average match. It is relatively windproof. It takes a pretty good puff to get this to go out. And I like that it's got some reach and it doesn't burn down and eventually burn your fingers. It's always going to stay, the fire's going to stay right here. One of the cons to this is that you really can only burn it for, I don't know, 20 seconds or so, and then you need to pretty much put it out, blow it out, and then recharge your wick with more fuel. Otherwise, once the fuel is exhausted, it will start just burning your wick and will burn it down to the point that it won't function. So that's one thing you have to be careful of, but it's pretty easy. Blow it out, dip it in, relight it, and you can get some more time out of it. Now, those are the match style things that I've got. The next thing I've got, I used to carry a good old Bic lighter, but I learned that those do not work in freezing temperatures. 35 degrees Fahrenheit's about your limit for a good old lighter to work. It has something to do with how the gas aerates so that it becomes flammable, and if it gets too cold, it doesn't do that. I have started carrying, this is brand new. I got this for my wife. It came in a 2-pack, so I took the other one. I've got a couple options here. This was my first one. And this is kind of a jet lighter. It is pressurized. You probably can't see the flame on that, but you did see it light up. And I like that because it burns a little bit hotter. So if you've got some material that's a little wet, maybe hard to catch on fire, this works really well to get that going. What I don't like about this particular one is it runs out of fuel pretty quickly. Zippo lighters, not great because they are not airtight. Here's the original insert for this lighter. You fill up this reservoir with fluid and you put it in. It will evaporate, and I have found I get back to these after a month or so and it won't light because the fluid has evaporated. I did find, however, that Zippo makes an insert that is airtight, that is basically a jet lighter. And this sat for several years in a box. I kind of lost track of it. I just found it recently, and it lit right up. I haven't recharged it with fluid, and it is ready to go. So if you're a Zippo person, you can get this insert. It is a Zippo brand. It's not an off-brand, and that could work. But I find this a little bit heavy and bulky, so I don't carry this one either. As I said, I just recently got this for my wife's kit. It has a see-through fuel reservoir, so you can see how much fuel you've got. It's a big reservoir. This is kind of bulky, but what I really like about it, 3 flames. And so, particularly for my wife, that is a great thing for her to get a fire started. But again, if it's too cold, this is not going to work the best. So that's when I would go to the match, or I do have the most rudimentary thing I've got is just a good old ferro rod. This is very capable if you've got the right fire starter to go with it. What I like about these, you don't want just a little one that's part of another kit or something. You want something that's got some length to it, as this does, because you want to be able, in certain circumstances, to really shower some sparks onto your starting material. So the longer you have, the more you can do that, the hotter it can get, the more likely you are to get something started. It looks like this one's about 4 inches long. Somewhere in the 4 to 6 range is what I would consider worth carrying in your kit. So I've got that one there. And those are my ignition sources. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 ignition sources that I've got something here that will work under any circumstance. I'm editing this video, and there's one thing I forgot to mention that I feel I need to insert here about ignition sources. I do not have any experience with electric lighters, the type that use some sort of arc or plasma technology to work. And there's 2 reasons that I am not really interested in those. Number 1, my experience with anything battery operated, like hand warmers and things like that, is that a little bit of cold can really make them all but useless. And so I have some kind of battery anxiety, so to speak, with electrical stuff when it comes to fires. Secondly, it's been more successful for me in general to start a fire, to put my fire starter down and then put a tinder bundle or something around it and then reach my fire source into that bundle to light the fire starter. I know lots of people will light their fire starter and then pile their materials on top of it. I've not had as good success with that. For that reason, I like ignition sources that have some reach to them. My jet style lighters are hot. Even you don't even have to get the flame to something to get it to burn because it's pushing so much heat. So they give me a good inch or more of reach. Those plasma electric lighter things, they work, as far as I understand, similar to like a spark plug. They have to have something to arc against, and so it has to be relatively close. And that just doesn't interest me. I don't think that's really going to work for me, so I don't have those in my kit. I have seen recently advertised something, military grade, now available for civilians, seller stuff. An electric one that supposedly has a torch on it that's like 6 inches long. It's hot enough to melt aluminum like pop cans and stuff like that. I'm curious about those, but not enough to spend 20 bucks for one. And they look bigger than what I would want to carry around. In fact, they look too big to fit in my pouch. So I'm not interested in those. I don't have any of those in my kit. And that's why. I do have one other thing here. This could be helpful, and that is this pocket blower. Pull this out. You can extend it, and you can use this to blow on the fire and help get some flames going. I've used this for camping, haven't needed it for an emergency fire. With that, we are ready to discuss item number 2, and that is fire starters. So what is the difference between an ignition source and a fire starter? An ignition source is pretty much anything that will create a spark or a flame to get your fire initiated and going. A fire starter is something that's going to catch that flame or spark and create a fire out of it, ultimately leading to something self-sustaining. Can a lighter also be a fire starter? In certain conditions, yes. But I am planning for conditions that are not always ideal, and so I want something that's going to burn longer than either the fuel I've got in a lighter, or in a traditional like Bic lighter, you know, your top is going to get really hot and eventually you're going to cause damage to it or burn yourself. You're going to need to give that a rest. So I've got a couple of different options for fire starters here. Number 1, this one is fire starter. This is Blackbeard, and it's basically a fire rope. This rope is infused with something to help it burn longer. It's probably a cotton or some such. What I like about this particular one, because it is rope style, I can cut off as much as I need. I'm not committed to using this entire thing. Or I can take one of the big 3 strands apart, or I can even take the smaller strands apart. So this is very customizable for how much you might need, and can give you a chance to maybe repeat things if it doesn't work out. So that's why I carry that. Supposedly this is fairly water resistant. I haven't tested that. You can see I've opened the top. I bought this on Amazon. It came in a pack of 3. I've just put 1 in each kit, including my wife's. So that's one option to have. Let me share with you one of the ideas I've tried that thus far has turned out to be a total disappointment. I heard about this idea several years ago through another YouTube channel, and I don't remember which one it is, so I can't link it. But the idea was to take these cotton rounds, commonly thought of as makeup pads or makeup removal pads, and coat them with petroleum jelly. I like that idea because it's small and can fit in a reasonably small fire kit like I have. And so I picked up a pack of these, and then I put them in one of these little snack baggies. Seem to fit size-wise real well, but you can see this one's been riding around with me for 2 years or so, and you can see even this one up at the top, the 2 halves have completely separated in the bag. What bothers me is how they actually worked. I used these on one occasion. I was really excited about it. It was just to get a campfire going, so it was not an emergency situation, fortunately. And to say that I was disappointed in the performance is an understatement. I lit them with a lighter, and they did seem to light okay, but the flame wasn't particularly big, and they did not burn for very long. We had a handful of what I would consider normal tinder, which is about pencil-sized sticks that we had kind of bunched up around it, plenty of air and everything, and it did not have enough fortitude to it to even get that tinder bundle started. And I even tried doubling and tripling them up, and it still didn't work. Obviously, if it didn't work in pretty ideal conditions, non-ideal conditions is just absolutely wishful thinking. And then they're messy. They leave Vaseline and stuff all over your hands, which I am not a fan of that. I only have these in my pack just because I'm trying to finish them off. But I have not liked these as a fire starter. But we're going to put these to the test again today and see if there's maybe something else I can do with them to make them a more reliable and viable option. One of the products we're going to be testing out today for its fire starting potential is tampons. A few years ago, I was watching a video on emergency preparedness and first aid kits, and someone suggested tampons as part of a first aid kit are an essential. Something that I readily admit, as a perpetual bachelor, I had not considered. There were multiple reasons for the inclusion of that product. Recently, I watched a video on fire starters that suggested tampons are an excellent option. And so that was the catalyst that finally got me to invest in a box. Today, we're going to put that to the test. I'm going to try a couple of different ways with both the tampons and the cotton rounds, and we're going to see if one is particularly better than the other. I did a YouTube search for people who were using tampons as fire starters, and one channel in particular said that the best ones are ones that have a cardboard case. I'm admittedly a bit naive about the world of tampons and did not know that was an option, and I had already purchased the typical bullet plastic style ones. I've already got them, I've already opened a few, so I'm going to see if there's something we can do with these to make them work. One thing that I like about these that, at least on video, appeared to not be the case with the cardboard ones is these have a much smaller footprint than the cardboard ones that looked quite a bit longer and bulkier. And I am in search of something that can fit in my fire kit without making the bag seem like it's going to explode. And I'm not really interested in getting a bigger bag for that particular gear. So this is about as big as I'm willing to try to fit into my particular bag. I apologize for yet another editorial interruption. I'm pretty sure this will be the last one, and I think you'll forgive me when I tell you that I'm going to save you 40 to 45 minutes of viewing time by consolidating some information. A couple of things that I was reminded of. First of all, I found kind of the timestamp from my original footage, and it is from early in 2021. It is now July 2025, so that footage is over 4 years old. And you may notice with the new footage next to the old footage that I'm talking about the wax-covered fire starters a little bit differently. In my original footage, I was experimenting. They were a new idea to me, and I wanted to see how they would work. And I did some tests, which I have footage of. I'm going to consolidate a bunch of that footage, but it was still a new idea to me. Whereas now, I have used them on multiple occasions, and I can say definitively that they work. So how I talk about them is a little different between the two time periods based on some experience. Secondly, I had completely forgotten about this until I reviewed some footage, but my first batch that I made a mistake of melting the wax too hot and dipping the makeup rounds and the tampons in the wax while it was too hot, and that led to some problems with the first batch that they didn't really work all that well. The rounds kind of bubbled up and expanded in the middle, kind of starting to turn into a ball, a flat ball, and the tampons would swell and not really go back down, and then they kind of melted or welded to the casing, and I actually wasn't able to get them out and had to throw them away. They didn't work. The next night I made my second batch, and I learned something valuable that I use to this day, which is how I made them in tonight's footage, and that is to melt the wax low and slow, and once it's melted, make the products. And if the wax isn't too hot, it won't cause things to expand. The rounds are nice little pucks, they're nice and flat, and the tampons, they don't swell up and expand really. I can pull them back into the case, and once they've cooled, they pop right back out, so they don't fuse together. About the tampons, one thing that I have noticed in a couple of uses is I've talked about using the string as kind of a wick, and that is both an advantage, but it is a little temperamental. If there's anything touching it before the color section, which is about an inch above the actual tampon, it does have a tendency to smother that out. So you want to make sure that if you do use that string as a wick, that there's nothing touching it. It doesn't need a lot of space, but it does need a little bit of space. And lastly, to finish my original footage, I took a 1/2 inch dowel, cut it in about 6-inch lengths, and I went out in the snow and tested these products. I vaguely remember my camera at the time, which was my phone, got too cold and wouldn't record video. So I got some pictures of that excursion, but I don't have any video footage of that. So I will put those pictures in, but I will say that the products performed admirably. All 4 of my piles caught on fire and burned in the snow and burned until they were gone. And that was the experiment that really got me to start to trust these wax-coated products that are now my go-to fire starters in just about any condition. What I have done, as you can see, I cut off the tabs on the top. I take this out, all the way out, and I soak this in wax. Now this is the reason I cut the tabs off. When you put this in wax, it will start to relax and start to open up. If you've got the tabs on here, you won't get it back into the container. But if you cut the tabs off, I soak it up to about right here. I leave this top ½ an inch or so normal. That's because that catches flame a little easier. Once that's going, then it'll start burning the wax. These burn in this condition for 15 to 18 minutes, if I remember right. That gives you a lot of time to get a fire going, get materials dried out, small materials lit. So, and I also like these because this acts almost like a wick. I can put this down in the middle of a tinder bundle or whatever. If I've got access to this up here with a match or whatever, I can get this lit. As long as the wind's not blowing too hard, this will just work its way down. It's like a candle. These are fantastic. I've used these on several occasions. They are one of my favorite fire starters. And once I get the wax on it, I just put it back through here, and I use the container to almost like wring it out a little bit, get the excess wax off, let it cool. These are fairly waterproof because of the wax, so if this gets wet, you still have a good chance that this will still burn even when wet. I keep at least 3 of these in each kit. In this particular one, I've got 4 of them. So, one of my favorite fire starters, and the footprint is relatively small. So that's another thing I like about these. They're pretty clean. I don't have to worry about you know, my hands getting dirty and stuff. So the other one that is probably my go-to favorite is these makeup rounds, but coated in wax. And I need more for this kit. So let me take you into the kitchen and show you how I make them. I have here a medium-sized pot. I've got some wax. These are some candles, unscented. What I really like about these particular candles is they don't have the metal container around them. They're just a candle with a wick, so they're really easy to melt down without too much trouble. All right, when they are done, they need a place to cool. So I've got a piece of wax paper set out right here. These are the cotton rounds I've been using, get through a whole bunch of them today. With that, I'm going to turn this on and get this melting. It does not take much on my oven. I'm going to put it at like a 2.5 and let that liquefy. Now this is not my original idea. I got this from another YouTuber. Can't remember who I got it from. Unfortunately, I can't give them credit. I did see a couple years ago another video where someone did this, and they added some lighter fluid to the wax. They still had to break the cotton rounds kind of in half to get them to light with a ferro rod, which is the same thing I have to do. So I don't think the lighter fluid really gives you much of an advantage. So I don't do it. I'm just going to do regular wax. But I will show you a little secret I have found works great when this is melted and we're ready to start dipping. While we're waiting for this wax to liquefy, let me show you some videos from my original tests with both these cotton rounds and the tampons. So without further ado, let's get to some tests. This is a wax coated disc, cotton round, fully coated, and we will pair that against a Vaseline coated round. So put that one there, wax one there. I think we can fit another one in here. Here's the waxed one with the soft tip, which I anticipate to be like good for lighting. So here we go. Again, I'm going to use my lighter, and just so I get a good lift on it, I'm going to light it this way, going up. Ooh, oh, so that took right off. Just about burned me. Okay, let's try this one. I'll go to the side this time. Okay, that's going. So that one probably would have started with just a good spark. This one, you definitely need a lighter or a match. You probably didn't see that, but I do have that going. But definitely a slower burn. Okay, so versus just a plain round pad, Vaseline covered is definitely an improvement, but that wax covered one, you can see down there, that's definitely superior. So the Vaseline one's already about burned out. Looks like similar to the original, that it didn't burn it all the way through. Now in the middle of a tinder bundle, that might perform quite a bit differently. But I like how that wax covered one is burning much, much better. In fact, you could probably have torn that one in half and gotten a really good fire started with that. I mean, that's not even really showing on the edge. It's just barely turning brown, but it hasn't actually started burning any of it up yet. Much more fire to that one. Yeah, so far in just these 4 minutes we've been going, that is far superior to a petroleum jelly covered. I'm going to go ahead and move this one out of the way. And it's light. Okay, now that lit much easier. I feel like I might have been able to get a spark to light that one where I couldn't with the one that was fully covered. Now the video that introduced this idea to me, he broke them in half and used the dry stuff on the inside to catch a spark, but he was able to light them with a ferro rod or of some sort. And it lit on the first try for him. So, but yeah, how that is burning, I am very confident that I could get a fire started with that one on the left. right, we've been going almost 10 minutes with this one on the left, and it had good flame all the way through. So the tampon control test, it burned for about 14 minutes, but a lot of that there was no flame, just ember. This had actual flame for just about 10 minutes. Solid 9 minutes. And I imagine that the one at the top's not going to be that far off, just from that little corner that is on. Looks like this has now kind of burned out, run out of wax. We'll let the other one finish, and then we'll be on to test number 3. Okay, looks like that other one just went out. And I'll say the one that was fully coated with wax did burn quite a bit longer. I'll check the video on that. So that did stick to the bottom a little bit, so there is still some wax there. But there's a lot more left of this one than of the other one. And there's still a little bit of wax left on the back of this. If it changed position and relit it, it would probably burn a bit longer. Okay, you can see in the corner there, the last of my wax is just starting to liquefy. On my 2.5 setting here at my stove, it took a total of 10 to 15 minutes. This, I've got a lot of wax in there. There's 9 to 12 of those little candles in there, so which is kind of excessive. I just didn't want to keep them in the box anymore, so I just melted them down. They just stay in this pan for when I want to make stuff. So, alright, this is ready to go, and let me get a couple of things ready and then I'll bring you back and show you my process. I have used my fingers to dip these before. You get wax on them. I haven't been burned, but it is uncomfortably hot. So I've got just a small pair of tweezers here that I use. I hold it here, and I'm going to dip this down about to the tweezer line. Go like that. That sucks that oil, that wax up. Now it did kind of suck up even into the tweezers, so the next one I might go a little bit less. Let's set this right behind you here just to let that cool on the mat. Let's try another one. Now my intent here, I want this little corner here to not have any wax in it. See, this one I got just about right. If you can see that, I'll try to get out of the light here. There's a little bit of just plain, get some of the excess wax out of that one. There's a little bit of plain cotton right here in this end, and the reason I want that is that's a lot easier to light, especially with something like a ferro rod. That's going to catch a lot easier. Now if you're using a match or a lighter, you can light this pretty much anywhere in a second. I mean that like literally. And it works great. But if you're using a ferro rod, it really helps to have just some plain cotton. I have got one completely saturated to light with a ferro rod, but I had to shower it over and over again with sparks to get it to catch. If you do opt to soak the whole thing, I have found for a ferro rod, the best thing to do is break it in half, as I've mentioned before. You want to get some of the little fibers. The fibers are going to catch. The wax is going to block those from catching a spark. But if you break it in half and get some of those fibers sticking up almost like little needles. I'm thinking of particularly like stinging nettle kind of needles. You get those sticking up, they will catch the flame, and they work pretty well. So you can get these to light either way. This is just what I have found kind of works the best. So that's pretty much the process. I've got this stack. I'm going to make as many as I can fit. So my best one here, you can see the white spot on that second one right there. That's what I want. That is ideal. I've got, that one's got a little spot on it. So these are soaking up the wax. So I need to just not dip them quite as far. But I like these because they have a relatively small footprint. I can stack 5, 7, 8 of these in a sandwich bag and put them in my fire kit. They last forever. They're ready to go. They are my go-to fire starter for just about any situation. The last thing I will mention is I have used these in all sorts of conditions. The tampon ones that I showed you earlier, I was out last year with my nephews, my brother, on a snowmobile ride, and one of the machines broke down. It was fixable, but we had to go back to the truck to get the tools and parts to fix it. So some of us stayed and rode around the area of the broken machine just to kill some time while a group went back for those materials. And after an hour or so, I decided to test my skills and see if I could get a fire going. And I used one of those tampon things. I went and found a dead tree, cut it down with my saw. It was about 4 inches thick, so it was pretty reasonable. Harvested branches off of that, used one of those tampon lighters, and in one try I had a fire going in the snow. It worked fantastic. Eventually the other riders came. We all sat around the fire and just chilled for about half an hour until the rest of the crew came back. We got our machine fixed and got it out. They work. For comparison, so here's the what I prefer just because of the smaller footprint. I do have one that I did butterfly out that is waxed. Everything else about it is the same. Obviously, I couldn't get it back in the container. This will burn for almost 20 minutes, the way it is. So if you want a couple extra minutes for your fire starter, this would be the one you could go with. Footprint's not terrible, but clearly it's a little bit more than this one. I'm willing to sacrifice 2 or 3 minutes of burn time for this smaller footprint style. All right, I have arrived at the cabin. I'm not going to show that to you because it's not mine to show, but this is kind of the backdrop. A little bit of the porch there, but you can see. So this is wood-like conditions, which is exactly what I want to test in. So I'm going to put on a hat and gloves here momentarily because it is about 10 degrees cooler. So we're right around 30 degrees now. And let me show you what materials I'm using. All right, so I've got my fire kit here with my fire starting options. Here's my petroleum jelly covered
pads, which I brought just because I'm really just trying to use them up at this point. And then in this bag, I've got all my wax covered options, the butterfly tampons, the encased bullet tampons, and then the waxed makeup pads. And then what I'm going to use for materials, I got some dowel rods from Home Center, 2 1/4-inch ones that I'm going to cut up probably about that long, 5-6 inches long. And then I also got 1 1/2 inch, because if I'm getting 20 minutes burn time out of these, even though that's bigger than what I would probably grab for tinder, it's I'm thinking if I can get that started, then I can probably get something started in extreme conditions. So the one inconclusive part of this test is going to be that this is straight out of the car and it's totally dry. It's not foraged from someplace like that where it's been out and might have a little wetness to it. But again, if it can start something this thick, then I think it can start something this thick even if it's a little bit damp or wet. So let me get these cut up, and then we'll get to getting our different little teepees set up and get lighting some stuff.
Pretty much everything else I've got I have used at some point, and I have liked them in some way or another. And there's 2 in particular I'm going to focus on here. Let me share. This one is kind of a flammable powder that I like this because the footprint is relatively small. It is waterproof. You can literally dump this on water. It will float, and you can light it, and it'll stay lit on top of the water. So I like that. So this can be very handy. The other one I've got here, I have used this one in the snow, and it worked. These little wet fire cubes. I forget which company puts these out, but they're pretty readily available. Just look up wet fire. These burn for probably about 5 minutes, if I remember right. And they will catch a spark from a ferro rod. They'll light pretty easily, and they burn pretty well. So I have a couple of those in each kit. This is a viable option. So this is Zippo. This is their emergency fire, EFK, emergency fire. I forget what the K stands for. But you've got just your flint striker, just like a lighter. It just provides a spark, and then underneath there's these little cotton rounds, and there's like 4 or 5 of them down in there. And all you do is you just get this out. It feels like it's impregnated with something, some cotton or some such, or some wax or something, but you just put this down, flick it with this, it catches that spark, and it goes. They really light quite easily. I'm not sure how long they burn, and for just a standalone fire starter, this is actually pretty good. The reason I quit carrying it is the footprint. It takes a lot of space considering the other stuff in the kit that I've got. This is just kind of bulky. So that's about all I have for this video. If you found this information helpful, useful, entertaining, Give me a like if you want to see more material like this. Subscribe and make a comment down below if you've got some ideas to share. I'm always gathering more ideas for some things that might be better or as good or just different. If you're interested in a video on saws for these types of situations, when I go camping, I carry an axe or a hatchet and I use them, but when I'm out on my day stuff, those are too unwieldy and impractical to carry. So I carry a saw. I've tried several different saws and I have found the one that I think is most efficient, that I really like. If you're interested in hearing about that and some of the other ones I've been through on that journey, make a comment below and I'll make a video on that. Thanks for tuning in. I hope to catch you on the next one.